WNST up in Philadelphia as well as in New England. We'll be monitoring all things championship game around here as we make our pathway to Minnesota for Super Bowl 52. Luke and I will be on the scene all week from the Mall of America in Bloomington. This guy and his publication covering all things NFL as well. He is one of our defending champions around here, from Northern Virginia, and fighting from the home office here as the reporters take to the fields in Philadelphia, New England. He is an NFL writer and editor at USA Today Sports. He's also a U2 fanatic and a Pearl Jam guy, and that's why I like him. By Nate Davis is the way to find him out on Twitter. And here he is yet again talking about the New England Patriots going back to a Super Bowl. Nate Davis, please say this is the last time we're going to see this treachery.
I mean, your guess is as good as mine, Nestor. Obviously, there's been the ESPN report, and it sure seems like the imminent breakup of the coaching staff, is coming. I think the last time Belichick lost both coordinators was Charlie Weiss and Romeo Crennel for the 2004 team, and I'm sure Ravens fans, consider that the beginning of a nice, 10-year golden era when the Patriots won those Super Bowls. So we'll see if that happens. We'll see how much longer Tom Brady can stick around. But I think either way, and even if Brady, Kraft, and Belichick, are able to work through their alleged differences or whatever else, I mean, this team definitely is going to go through some period of transition in 2018.
We tell stories in the sports business. I've been doing that my whole life, as have you. And, I guess there's a story here in all four corners, right? Like, let's start with Minnesota, because to me, that's the delicious story, right? Like, that the Minnesota Vikings could host and play in and potentially win a Super Bowl in their own stadium. For me, this is my 25th Super Bowl that I'm broadcasting live from. This would be completely unique. I mean, I'm so looking forward to that. But that's not to say that the Eagles wouldn't be a great story showing up there with Nick Foles and all of my purple pals from the Ravens that have been there, or the Jaguars, which would be the most unlikely thing in the world if Blake Bortles is a Super Bowl quarterback this time next week. And, of course, the Patriots are their own thing. But let's start with the Vikings, because that thing's kind of interesting and delicious, and it really lends itself to this whole defense and anti-franchise quarterback thing, right?
Well, it certainly lends credence. It's the counterpoint to what we hear every year at the beginning of each season is that, it's a passing league, it's a quarterback league. You got to have a franchise quarterback. That's what do we always talk about before the draft is, does the team have his quarterback? If it doesn't, who's it going to get? And like you said, and particularly, people from the Baltimore constituency are going to say, hey, you don't need Tom Brady or Peyton Manning to win championships. I mean, we know that in Baltimore. So. But yeah, this is proof positive. I mean, you got Tom Brady, then you've got three guys that nobody would have expected to have taken their teams to championship weekend. Left to go. So it certainly does give credence that there are other ways to skin a cat in the NFL, if you will. Certainly there has been some element of I don't want to say luck, but I mean having Carson Wentz go down, Aaron Rodgers go down. We've seen a lot of guys get injured this year, so maybe it's a little bit of an outlier of a year, but nonetheless. And my favorite point about the Vikings too, Nestor, is if they do get there, it's funny. The AFC team will be the home team in the Super Bowl this year. So may see the Vikings wearing white in Minnesota if they do in fact make the big game.
What is nice, they're going to let them use their own facility. So I think that would be nice. But it's an interesting conversation to be having at this point because if I would have said Case Keenum, Blake Bortles, and Nick Foles are your quarterback, you would say, I don't care what team. If they're the Patriots, we still have no chance to go to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl. That would have been the common thought back in June, July, August. And I think Keenum's come the furthest, and I've seen maybe more of him play this year. We got skunked out in Minnesota about 9 weeks ago. I got on a plane and felt bad about Case Keenum as well. He came out of a tree and beat us in Houston 3 years ago, so I am familiar with him. But just watching him play, he looks the most like some sort of poor man's Tom Brady in making passes that are very, very accurate, decisions that are very, very good, and they always, was the cliche, play within himself and not do too much and game manage and all of that stuff. But he looks to be the ultimate version of that right now. And I know that he threw the ball around a lot at college, but he looks like a guy that played maybe in the Arena League or something, the way he throws the football.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I mean, he's kind of been on the fringe of the MVP debate, kind of late in the season. He's going to stay on the fringe, but, I think he at least merited being on the outside of that discussion. I mean, he had a really nice year, and a guy, obviously, who was signed to back up Sam Bradford this year, kind of be that Teddy Bridgewater insurance policy. Then he ends up taking him, as far as the NFC Championship game. It comes from situations. Houston was not in a great offensive situation when he was there. Obviously, when he and Nick Foles were teammates on the 2015 Rams, I mean, we kind of have seen how poorly that offense was. You have to say coached, given how easily and quickly Sean McVay turned them around this year. But, Case Keenum didn't play badly last year when he was starting for the Rams in the first half of the season. And he's going to be a free agent. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Vikings do with him, what another team, may decide to bid for him. And you made a Tom Brady comparison. As a poor man's Tom Brady, but I think maybe he's more like a poor man's Drew Brees. I mean, he's kind of got that 6-foot stature, but accurate guy, enough arm strength, makes good decisions. Teammates like him, bit of a fiery guy, maybe more so than most quarterbacks. So it's going to be.
I think he throws the ball well. I mean, for me, inside 20 yards, it feels to me like he can put the ball through the tire. And Blake Bortles would sit there all day hitting the side of the tire if he hit the tire at all. I mean, literally, there's an accuracy issue that I think I see with Bortles that I would, if you told me Case Keenum's going to be my quarterback the next 3 years, I think, well, I don't think we're going to win 14 games, but I think we can win 10 or 11, much like I think about Flacco or, Phillip Rivers or any number of other guys who didn't win 10 or 11 this year, by the way, but he did, right?
Right. Well, exactly, and I think that's what I'm saying. So it's going to be interesting to see what the market is for him, particularly, and let's just go right to a team like Jacksonville. I mean, if all you want is a guy that's going to make good decisions, is going to be accurate, which, by the way, those are the two quarterback traits that tend to get pushed down at draft time when all we care about is being 6'4", 230 with a howitzer of an arm. That's not Case Keenum, but I mean, he's got the traits at the end of the day. Are the ones that help you win. And like you said, it's being accurate and it's being smart with the football. And if you can put a guy like him with the Jaguars or maybe the Broncos or whatever, I mean, you could certainly see those teams at least being perennial playoff teams and maybe more. So I'll be fascinated to see where Keenum lands in the offseason, or if the Vikings decide, hey, this is our guy, and maybe that shakes Teddy Bridgewater and or Sam Bradford loose, and we'll see where they go. But it's going to be fascinating to watch what happens.
He is Nate Davis. By Nate Davis is the way to find him out on Twitter of the USA Today. Also at USA Today Sports, and out on the website where they have full coverage of all things AFC and NFC Championship game this weekend. This portion of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at King Discount Liquors, lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. I got 3 bottles of Malbec packed away for this weekend. I'll have to get one of them out. Fire me up some beast this weekend as well. Get over to Rosedale. Give the King a ring over on Pulaski Highway. Also brought to you by our friends at D&L Window Tinting. 26 years of tinting everything. Cars, boats, businesses. They put the shades on the sun and they take away the squint, especially on these snowy, icy, white light days. They're in Parkville and in White Marsh. D&L Window Tinting. Nate Davis is our guest from the USA Today and out on Twitter at by Nate Davis. Our defensive discussion continues with the underdog, under-respected, underappreciated, surprise Philadelphia Eagles hosting the NFC Championship game. Second week in a row now, they're going to be an underdog according to Vegas, and Nick Foles not getting any respect here at all. But, I would not be shocked at all to see the Philadelphia Eagles win this football game on Sunday night.
No, I mean, I wouldn't either. Fun fact, the Eagles are 4-0 now in Eagles history in the Super Bowl era as home underdogs. I think back to last weekend, obviously further back to games like the 1980 NFC Championship against the Cowboys. So the Eagles will be looking to go 5-0 as home dogs, and they'll be happy to do it. But I think maybe being at home like it seemed to be this weekend will be the equalizer, because I think you have to say that the Vikings defense is just a little bit better than Philly's. Like we were just saying, I think you'd have to say Case Keenum is a little bit better than Nick Foles. Certainly their receivers look to be more effective. That's Minnesota's than Philly. So it looks like the Vikings kind of have just a slight edge in just about every area. But they do have to go outdoors where, obviously Minnesota team isn't accustomed to being a lot of the time. And we'll see if that's enough to get the Eagles over the hump, and I'm probably going to be looking to win another 15-10, 13-10 kind of game like they played against Atlanta.
Man, no job safe in this league, right? I mean, about 3 weeks ago, if we had been talking about Marvin Lewis and Hugh Jackson and Dirk Cutter and maybe even John Harbaugh after the way the Ravens lost, there haven't been as many jobs, and then the malarkey thing happens this week, right?
Yeah, which didn't shock me. I mean, I thought he was in trouble going into the playoffs, and obviously he kind of bared his soul after beating the Chiefs, and then it doesn't work out regardless after the dreaded
vote of confidence.
vote of confidence. Thank you. But yeah, that being said, and you feel badly for the guy personally, but I thought that team was better last year when it finished a tiebreaker outside of the playoffs, but. I think they regressed. I mean, Marcus Mariota certainly did. The running game wasn't nearly as good as it was in 2016, and I just don't think they were trending in the right direction, even though they made the playoffs this year. 9-7, 9-7. But I think they needed more. Frankly, I thought they should have been more like an 11 or 12 win team this year, and I think that's what ownership wants to, and making the change.
Nate Davis, our guest from USA Today. Let's get on to this AFC Championship game because we talk about Tennessee, and that it did feel like the JV, right? I mean, it felt like the Patriots were the one team that didn't have to play very hard last weekend, where everyone else, including the Vikings, are lucky to be alive at this point, and the Eagles to some degree as well on the defensive side and beating Matt Ryan up there. But on the AFC side, we have a Jacksonville Jaguar team that maybe it's the logo on the helmet, as I've said all week, and maybe it's that we lost the expansion race to them 25 years ago, and the tarps over their seats, and nobody goes to their games and all of that stuff. They play their games over in London. But, man, I was sitting at the 45-yard line at Wembley Stadium, and we have people here were having Bloody Marys, and we're getting our ass kicked 41-0. On that day, I guess I wouldn't have been shocked if you would have said to me, that team there is going to win a game, in the playoffs and then go to Pittsburgh and somehow win a game and find itself playing in Foxborough. But they've won twice in Pittsburgh. They were beating us 41-0. So and we also lost to the Tennessee Titans. So Ravens fans should hold no stake to claim January at all, even though we came a 4th and 12 away from being one of the teams in the tournament. But I just think there's a natural inclination to say Blake Bortles, as we've already done in this conversation, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. But boy, you can make a case, and it looks like they're going to have decent weather in both of these locations this week. When I mean decent, like in the 40s and kind of like okay. Not windy, not rainy, not snowy, not, kind of like nice, decent football weather to sit in. Bortles ought to be able to operate a little better than ordinary. They've got a running game and Fournette's ankle, and certainly taking the ball away. And, coming from Baltimore where we've gone up there and smacked them in the mouth a couple of times, part of that is not just talent, running the ball, whether they bring the snowblower in to blow it away for a field goal, whether they're going to get a tuck rule, or, whether they're cheating in the locker rooms and bugging. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen up there, but part of it is not wetting yourself when you get off the bus. And I'll say this about the Jaguars, and I've said this all week, Nate. They did not wet themselves getting off the bus in Pittsburgh the other day. And part of that swagger with the kind of personality Ramsey is and the kind of personality that defense has become, if they go up there and they get a 3-and-out, or they take the ball away, or they get a punt return, or they block a kick, or they jar a fumble, or something were to go wrong up there, they might have a chance to surprise people, and I think that's why Vegas doesn't have them as the 16-point lowly underdog going up to Foxborough. I think people give them a puncher's chance because of the way they play defense and because they've won in Pittsburgh twice this week, and they were beating us 41-0 in London.
Well, I was just going to say puncher's chance myself, and like you said, these guys aren't going to be afraid. I think they're probably, they don't know what they don't know kind of thing, too, and I think that's going to help them being a young team. They do the things that have traditionally bothered Tom Brady. That's crushing, the interior pocket, getting him off the spot, giving him happy feet. All that. I mean, they can do all those things, and they kind of remind me of people forget about the 2010 Mark Sanchez Jets, winning in New England. It's funny to think about now, but obviously people always kind of went back to 2011, 2012, can the Ravens ever really win a big game with Joe Flacco? And the Ravens almost always play great in New England with Joe Flacco. I think Joe probably didn't have the amount of heat nationally that Blake Bortles has right now, but I mean, they're similar teams. I mean, elite defenses, able to run the ball, and a quarterback that, if he shows up, can be effective. And it makes you think of those old Ravens teams, those old Jets teams, and certainly these Jags. So they've got a shot. They can disrupt Brady, and I think they probably need kind of maybe one or two of those fluky plays. Maybe that pick six or that strip sack fumble for a touchdown like they got against Roethlisberger or whatever. But I mean, that defense has scored plenty of times this year. It's the best defense in the league against the pass. 55 sacks. I mean, I think they've got the recipe and the formula to pull this off if a couple things break right for them.
Well, as I said, part of it's a sticker on the side of the helmet, right? And the Patriots, this isn't Willie McGinnis and Brewski and Johnson and Rodney Harrison running around in their prime either. And it's also not him throwing the ball to Randy Moss and, having a Corey Dillon. Yeah, I don't see this Patriot team as being a juggernaut. I see them as part of the process we talked about, which is they play in a lousy division against a bunch of lousy teams. They get those 6 wins a year. They win the games they need to win. They lose a couple along the way, and they put you into this position where a team like Tennessee comes in looking like the JV, looking a little scared, looking a little cold, getting off the bus. I don't know that this one isn't 13-10 at halftime somehow, some way, and the version of Brady screaming at guys about lining up wrong and it not going so well for him. That this is the kind of defense that can give him some fits and maybe frustrate him for a series or 2 or 3 that could lead the sled downhill a little bit on Sunday.
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I'm curious to see what the Jags do, with that defense, because I feel like anymore, Tom Brady had very unimpressive, at least by his standards, December with the 6 touchdowns, the 5 picks. They've really kind of been running that offense through Deion Lewis lately. But I mean, I think you're right. I think they are vulnerable, maybe more so than we've seen in recent years. But I'm curious what the Jags do with the defense. I mean, if you keep Jalen Ramsey and AJ Bouye on Chris Hogan and Brandon Cooks, I'm not sure that's the best way to use them, because they're probably going to get run off of each play, kind of taken out of the equation to some degree, and Brady's going to try to pick you apart underneath in that intermediate passing game like he likes to do so well. And that's what he did against Tennessee. 20 of his 35 completions were to running backs and tight ends, and then 11 more to Danny Amendola, and obviously he's a short area receiver. So do you put Jalen Ramsey on Gronk? Do you put Jalen Ramsey on Amendola, the way the Jets used to put Revis on Wes Welker, that kind of stuff? It's going to be real interesting to see how the Jags try to leverage their talent and maybe create some mismatches that are going to bother the Patriots.
Nate, anything you want to say about the Ravens? We felt so awful about 4th and 12, and we're waiting on Steve Bisciotti to say something, and nobody's getting fired, nobody's going over the side of the boat here, which is pretty usual, business as usual in Baltimore. But they haven't made the playoffs 3 years in a row, 4 out of 5, and all that. But then you see the way the Saints lost on Sunday, right? Then you see the way the Steelers lost on Sunday, and you say to yourself, well, nobody's feeling real good about themselves right now. Everybody has their 4th and 12 somehow, some way.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fluky season. I thought the Ravens were pretty much, I think probably as you did and most people in Baltimore did. It sure felt like they were just shy of a shoe-in for the playoffs going into Week 17, catching a Bengals team with nothing to play for. But, yeah, I mean, this stuff happens. I mean, you got to feel relatively good about the way your defense played, per usual, most of the season. The way the offense kind of came around late in the year. Seems like you found something there with Alex Collins. Marshall Yanda's back in a year. I mean, the Ravens have a chance to kind of be back up in that AFC elite category in 2018. Obviously going to have to make some changes here and there. But I mean, I do think the one question you kind of have to ask yourself, Joe Flacco is getting up there. It took him a long time to warm up this season. Obviously had the back injury in training camp, and it seemed like it really took a while to overcome that. I'm not sure he ever really fully recovered. But, I mean, do you need to start thinking about making a change there? I mean, you will at some point, but how soon is that? Is he going to be better next year? We'll see. But, I mean, I feel like the Ravens ought to be back strong soon enough, despite the recent disappointments. Well,
it's interesting you'd say maybe you got to consider making a change there. You could say that about Ozzie, John, Marty Morningwig, Flacco, Suggs, defensively. They did make a change on defense with Pease. They could have gone any direction. They could have changed everything. They've changed nothing, literally. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Hey, I'll tell you a team that did that. The New Orleans Saints changed not a lot, right? They've changed defensive coordinators a dozen times, but they had the game won, right? I mean, this was a year where you could look at the Saints and say, hey, pipe down, relax, stay the course, you'll be fine, and that's clearly the way the Ravens are going, is to stay the course.
And I think, Nestor, too, I always feel like continuity is kind of the most underrated aspect of NFL success. And the Ravens, I mean, obviously the first half of the John Harbaugh era has been more successful and borne more fruit than recent years. But they're always competitive, and I think the Saints are a good example. I mean, they're kind of back now, and I think there are these natural, down cycles for any team. It's so hard to maintain a level of excellence in this salary cap era, particularly when you're losing key veterans along the way, as the Ravens have, like so many other teams. But it's hard to be the Patriots, and I think obviously, but I think teams that tend to keep their front office and coaching staffs together tend to rebound more quickly. And I think when you hit on a winning formula, you're able to replicate that. I think stick with it and don't fall into the trap that we see with the Detroit Lions and the Cleveland Browns and so many teams that are constantly turning over and trying to find something and never really do.
Dude, I have to laugh, and I'm just going to throw this in, and you don't even have to respond to it, but you said Jim Harbaugh, and I'm thinking to myself, the second half, I'm re-releasing Purple Rain 2, like literally this week, a chapter a day, every day, for 24 days leading up. It's our 5-year anniversary and my little reunion to locking myself in a room and writing a book in 99 days. It's 500 pages long on the team. And, 5 years later, there was no second act to Jim Harbaugh, right? Like, they threw him out. How has that gone for them, right? Right? I mean, imagine the last 5 years with Jim Harbaugh and Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco had they kept the band together somehow, some way. They didn't, and I can't imagine it going anywhere. It had to have gone better if he'd stayed, because it couldn't have gone any worse, right?
In San Francisco?
Yes.
Well, I mean, Jim Harbaugh was the guy that, I got to say, he knew how to use Colin Kaepernick. I mean, Chip Kelly never really figured it out, and certainly under Tom Sula, it didn't go well. I mean, that's the key to NFL coaching, I think, is conform your game plan and your schemes and all that to the talent. Don't make the talent try to fit into the scheme. And Jim Harbaugh leveraged Colin Kaepernick really well for a number of years, and obviously that team had, I think, 4 playoff appearances in a row under Jim Harbaugh, and where has it been since? It looks like they're on the way back now finally.
Well, be careful who you throw out, I guess would be my point. When you've got something, when you've got good cook going on, don't change the kitchen, I would say. Nate, always a pleasure, man. I'm happy for you and me that you two are going back on tour next summer, so I hope to imbibe an adult refreshment with you somewhere where Sunday Bloody Sunday is playing.
Sounds good, Nestor. Thanks.
Appreciate you. Nate Davis joining us here. He is by Nate Davis out on Twitter as well as a fanboy of U2, Star Wars, Pearl Jam, and HBO. And we thank him for his service in the U.S. Army Artillery as an officer. So there, I'm reading right from the Twitter. By Nate Davis out on USA Today, and one of the editors there as well. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. I'm out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.